Greetings. I'd like to welcome everyone in our audience today. We are very grateful that you have chosen to share some of your busy day with us. We know your time is valuable, and we'll honor that today with what I'm confident will be an engaging discussion. Once again, our topic is, will your bank be cited when customers ask AI? Our sponsor is iQuanti. Our host is American Banker, and my name is Mike Sisk. I am a contributing editor at American Banker, and I will be your moderator today. And I am very pleased to introduce our speaker today. Wayne Cichanski is VP Search and Site Experience at iQuanti. Just before I turn things over to Wayne, just a couple quick housekeeping notes that were in that introductory video. We do have time at the end for Q&A. You do not have to wait until the end to put your question into the queue. You can do that throughout the hour. We very much encourage you to do that. Just get that question in there as it occurs to you. If we don't get to a question you've asked in the time we have today together, we will definitely follow up after the program. So please ask away. We very much want to hear from you. And we do have one poll coming up pretty shortly, and I do encourage 100% participation. We're going to share the results live with everyone here, and it's a great way to see where everyone stands on the issue we've come together to discuss. So if you can weigh in on that poll, that would be fantastic. And with that, I think I will officially turn things over to Wayne. Wayne, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. And I appreciate everybody echoing Mike's thoughts on taking your time out today. I know everybody's really busy. AI is a topic that just really is saturated. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's looking to try to integrate it. I think we're learning a little bit more about what it is, how it works, and how it can impact our business. So the big thing here is, how can banks be cited through AI or LLMs? And part of that is just see how LLMs are actually choosing their sources, so you can be one of those main sources. As Mike mentioned, my name is Wayne Cichanski. I head up the organic growth at iQuanti. iQuanti is a New York, New Jersey-based headquarters, global footprint, and we specialize in search and performance marketing. So SEO and GEO is right up our alley. Our main focus is in the financial industry. So we do have different journeys, different data points, different proprietary tools that help aid just for the financial industry as well. So if you haven't heard of us, if you want to stop by, check us out, that'd be great. Again, I'm very approachable. I want to make sure that if I don't get to one of your questions, feel free to email me, connect to me on LinkedIn. I will make sure and absolutely get back to you. And we have some different talks and things coming up at some other events. If you see me, say hi, and love to chat a little bit more. With that being said, as Mike mentioned, we're going to start off with a poll. What's really interesting about this, hang on, went the wrong way. The poll here, I'm not going to make you stand up and do jumping jacks or anything. It's too early for that. But at the same token, if you do participate in this, it allows us to kind of maybe shape or weight the talk track as I'm going through. It won't completely pivot what I'm doing, but it will allow me to see kind of where the audience is at and what you're trying to struggle or trying to accomplish with AI. So with that being said, what's your top priority for AI search optimization in a short-term window in the next 6 months? Is it A, building topical authority and structured content for LLM retrievals? Or 2, B, tracking and improving brand citations in AI-generated answers? C, understanding how competitors are showing up in AI responses? Or D, developing an internal strategy or framework for the GEO platforms itself? So I'm going to give you a moment. If you feel free to select one of those answers, we're going to review them quickly, and then I'm going to go through today. Hopefully you can walk away with something new, something that you haven't heard before. I've talked about AI search before in the past and LLMs, however things are evolving. There's a little bit more frameworks around here, a little bit more takeaways for you. And I think there's some good actionable steps that could be applicable to your bank and your financial institution as you're going through that. So with that being said, why don't we kind of gauge where we're at here and see what people are doing. Okay, so 47% of the people tracking and improving brand citations and AI-generated answers. So we're definitely going to get into that. This fits right up that alley about how you actually show up in the LLM answer and what's happening in that synthesis pool in order to actually generate a citation for you. With that being said, let's talk a little bit here about what's happening. Obviously, we know SEO is still here. Google search is still here. It's not dead. It's not an or statement. This is where I really kind of double down and I come out with it's an and statement, meaning that you have to build on your SEO foundation even to be considered part of your LLM answers. So we're not going to abandon LLM foundations, but the traditional search is pivoting. There's more adoption to the LLMs from the answer engines like ChatGPT and Claude than there are what it used to be even 6 months ago. So a lot's changing in the market. Your goal here is that you're not just competing for a blue link, you're actually competing for that inclusion in that answer element. So how does it work? This is a kind of a really simple 4-step type of process that I'd love to kind of get into a little bit deeper here. And that is that, one, you have to understand the query understanding. That's the first thing that LLMs are going to look to do, is the query. That query is much deeper than what Google's query is. Google's looking for core intent matching based on the intent, not so much a keyword match like the old days, but it's an intent match. In the LLMs, they're looking for an expansion on this. And I'm going to double down and we're going to really get into that, what that means as we look at that expansion. But that's critical here in your query, which is going to affect your content strategy and what you actually publish on your website. And the other thing that happens in the query is it's giving contextual layering. It's giving your objective. People usually give it some background, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, who your audience is, what the goal of your prompt is. That's a lot deeper than what Google is doing as well. From there, we go to a retrieval system. This is right now in Google with the 10 blue links, we are this retrieval pool. We look at the links, we click on it, we look and search, and then we become the filtering process as well. In the LLMs, they're going to go out and pull data from this. They're going to use the search index from Google and from Bing and bring those in, plus their pre-trained knowledge bases. They're going to bring all of that into the retrieval pool, and we're going to get an understanding of this. You're going to see what I talk about a crawl depth or thresholds on your rank results. If you're in the top 100, like 50 to 100, most likely you are not going to get to the crawl depth. Typically, the retrieval pool is top 20 to top 30 ranks in Google and Bing. Of course, this is somewhat fluid, so that data can change, but it's a good rule of thumb. You definitely want to be in the top 20 ranks for your site to be even considered, your content to be considered in that retrieval. After we get to the retrieval, we need to get through a filtering process. This is where the LLMs are going to go through and make sure that your content that is about to cite is matching the intent, the query expansion, and it's authoritative, and it is not full of hallucinations. The content is citable, it's extractable, it's reusable, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It implies a trust signal. This trust signal, as we get into this, I'm going to reference this as entity trust. This is different than page authority or domain authority. This is holistic, and it's called entity trust. Lastly, after all of those come into play, then the LLM is going to do the synthesis. And this combines all of those sources, all of that information to give you a direct answer. So it's not really coming from a single source, it's coming from multiple sources, including its pre-trained knowledge base, plus what it's seeing on the web, and what is being validated through third-party sources or citations. Only a few actually win. So you might have thousands of pages indexed, and it gets through that filtering, and you might say 50 of them are good candidates out of that retrieval pool, and then it goes through the filtering, and it might say, okay, well, all of these 5 have good information, and it brings it down to that one dominant source. So the visibility that we're competing with is no longer page 1 versus page 2, or top 3 ranks versus the 4 through 10 ranks. You're looking to be cited, and if you're not, you're basically invisible. So the stakes are a little bit higher, and what we are doing is a little bit more meaningful and tactful than what Google's doing. These are 6 signals that I think are really important. This would be great. We're going to send the deck out, but if you want a screenshot, you want to look at something, grab a picture. This is one slide I would definitely recommend doing. there are 6 main things here that you want to understand how this looks at. Coverage depth. Coverage depth is going to be the first one. This is definitely a change to your content strategy. This is not the same old BAU as you typically would do with Google and just match the core intent. It's much deeper that. It's expanding that content, putting that contextual layering in there, implied questions. And I'm going to actually show you another screen about coverage depth that will kind of give you a cheat sheet on how to really audit and attack that for your pages that you have. Authoritative value. Authority is not gone away. It's not that's not important. A good rule of thumb is if you have high domain authority or high page authority, that is going to get you a seat at the table for the retrieval pools, but doesn't necessarily mean you get to speak. You just get to be prioritized in the retrieval pools, that you're authoritative with your content, but if your content doesn't match the coverage depth, you're still going to be overlooked. If your content doesn't have the consistent messaging in item number 4, then it's going to get overlooked. Okay. Brand coverage depth here. Brand strength and entity strength is holistically how everything is coming together. And I'm going to get into that. Extractability is can the boxes, the bots get into the extracting and be able to pull your code out and be able to cite it. And agent readiness is something that we want to look at. With the agent readiness, it's looking at, is your website 2-part ready? One for agentic AI, where agents can kind of come in and see your content, and then getting into web MCP and multi-agent, it's going to be, can you create structured content or coding like the WebMC to actually wrap around key information that is going to allow the bots to take action. Okay, so let's get into coverage depth a little bit more. What coverage depth actually means. A strong page answers the core intent, the core questions, but it also covers all of the supporting concepts, and the edge cases, and it anticipates the follow-up questions. So think of it like this. We used to say Google had one page for one intent, but LLM retrieval is looking for like a mini knowledge hub. So there is some crossover here. I have gotten some questions on what do you do? Do you go deep into one topic? Do you do multiple high volume terms on the same page? And the answer to that is yes and no. You want to create a mini hub that is covering everything, and you're kind of going down a rabbit hole. You want to cover the core intent of that particular topic, but as you move and navigate out into the rings and you get into the edge cases, if one of those edge cases has got a lot of search volume around it, most likely we're going to create a separate page for that and also go deep with that particular topic as well. So you're going to have some overlapping between the two, which is good. You want that overlap as we look at that. So think of this as a mini knowledge hub versus a single one answer, one content, one keyword page. Okay. So for example, if we have what is an APR, and your page is a brief 2-paragraph definition, and APR is ABC, it doesn't answer any follow-up questions. It only really scratches the surface of that core intent. Yes, it answered it, but overall it's pretty weak. Versus a page, when you say what is an APR, it's giving you that core intent, which is the definition of an APR, but it's also going into implied questions, edge cases such as, how is an APR calculated? I didn't ask that, but it's anticipating that that is a typical edge case that users that are asking about APR would want to know. So that is now included in your content versus just defining what an APR is. APR versus interest rate, another edge case. How do they differ? What's the difference between the two of them? You create content around that. Fixed APR versus a variable APR. Again, another edge case that we want to expand on and talk about. All of this is giving us content depth for the LLMs when they start looking at your page and evaluating it. So it fully explains the calculations, the definition, the edge cases, and it gets into some implied questions as a follow-up. So the page is much stronger holistically for the LLM than it would be that how we would write it for Google. Traditional search. Now, again, this is a keyword, credit score improving. I want to improve my credit score fast. What do we do here? In Google, again, typical layout. Sponsored paid links are up at the top. The rank results are below. We click on it. We are that retrieval pool. We are the filtering system because we're looking and evaluating it. We're doing all the works. However, with the LLMs, you took the same keyword, and this was in ChatGPT, and it does this wonderful thing where, yes, it's still answering the core intent, which is here are the 7 steps to improve your credit score. By the way, little pro tip, about a 35 to 40% boost in content in your citations if you use structured content. So when you have a list and you give it a headline, an H2 or an H1 that says, here's the 7 steps and what to do to improve your credit score, they love that. All of the LLMs love to package that. It's quick, it's definable, it's citable, and here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 steps is good. We encourage you to use structured content within your content itself. The second one being, it's giving me information about what variables are actually triggering what moves up or down or how fast or slow your credit score responds. Now, this is above and beyond a typical page on what is a credit or what is APR or what is, how do we improve our credit score fast would not typically include information like this about this variables. And it definitely would include this next one. This is all within the same answer. I did not ask any follow-up questions on this prompt. It was a single prompt, and it gave me all of this. But it gave me a 30-day action plan. It's looking to try to imply what I could be asking. What are my next steps? And it's trying to deliver that ahead of time without me doing a fan-out query or a follow-up question. But it gave me a full 30-day action plan of what to do on how to improve my credit score. And lastly here, it's continuing to anticipate other questions and next steps. And it's asking, what would you like me to do to continue this? So we're looking to kind of resolve that overall intention here. What's really interesting as I go back here, one of the things that I'd love to kind of say is that Google loves to give you an answer, and it allows you to keep searching. LLMs want to eliminate the need for you to search any further. They want to give you everything that you could possibly want and need in one spot at the same time. So their goal is slightly different than what Google's goal is. Obviously, that could be monetary or it could be, structure or utilitarian, how they're doing it. But the goal of an LLM is to allow you to stop searching because it's giving you all of the information you needed. Very different concept than, can I just match my core intent? So when you get into the content strategy for AI search, it does differ. Now, on the right-hand side, I've come up with something I've made up. This isn't a published document, if you will, but all of the points are accurate and true. I call it the 4 ables. The 4 ables are, is your content retrievable? Content needs to be easily discovered and retrievable and authoritative enough for the crawlers, the crawl bots to get deep enough into the ranks to find your content. Is it retrievable? Number 2, is it extractable? Meaning, can I lift and pull that content easily, or do I have to try to parse 2,000 words and figure out that there's no paragraph or no HTML that allows me to stop and start, so it's very difficult to extract that content. It's too much work for them. Number 3, is it citable? And this is really interesting. When you write your content, you're looking to almost give it quotes or standalone sentences that if you were to write something, does it pass a test that it stands on its own 2 feet by itself? And the ultimate goal is it reusable? Meaning, can this citable content be put into the knowledge base where in the future, when LLMs are being asked similar questions, it doesn't have to go and search for new answers. It can just pull it out and reuse it over and over and over. That's the ultimate goal as we look at this. So I think the 4 ables will help guide your content strategy. And when you look at your content strategy, these are the 4 main anatomies of it. Core intent match. Now, this could be for both Google, and LLMs because we need to match the core intent. So answers like, what's the best travel credit card? It gives you a direct answer, it gives you a structured summary as you move on that. However, the next three are typical parts of content strategy that isn't often deployed on a simple page for search, because they typically are going to expand the content too far. You're kind of competing with UX here, but there is a way. Don't let your UX team and your CRO team kind of override the importance of this. Keep in mind, if nobody finds you, it doesn't matter how great the page converts. Get the traffic there, then do your A/B testing, work on your CTAs, get the conversion that you're looking for, but get the traffic. You got it. That's the first step here. So with that being said, you need edge cases and subtopics. That's answering related questions. In this particular example, I'm an American Express card holder, so I pulled out what's Amex's best card for travel rewards, right? In this particular case, that would be an edge case or subtopic. And then implied questions, answers to questions that I never even asked. Do any of these require, or any of these benefits require enrollment? Or what type of lounge access do I have with these cards? Those are all different implied questions that I didn't actually answer. And then you get into the follow-up questions where you are start anticipating some of those. If you know the lounge access is a common question, you'd put that automatically in kind of an FAQ or follow-up questions to anticipate. So this anatomy is allowing you to transition your focus page from a core intent on Google to be very much expandable and more deep from an AI standpoint as kind of like a mini hub. So again, LMs don't ask, does this page match the keyword? They ask, does this eliminate the need for search further? I love that concept. I kind of use that in the back of my head all the time. And it really means that partial answers don't get cited. Completeness is now the new relevance. The best source is the one that removes ambiguity. These are all good quotes to kind of live by as you look at your content. Is it too vague? Is it not complete enough? If it is, you're going to be overlooked. So when we look, I talked about having an SEO foundation. This is critical. We're not abandoning what our regular SEO does for our answers. We're building on top of that. So we need to do all of the grade H1, H2, all of the structures. You need to build domain and page authority. You need to get your ranks up into a good threshold. Again, I see the data showing about the top 20 results are getting part of the answer inclusion. That's going to change and evolve over time. But above and beyond that, there's four main components of this. Answer architecture, which was we just kind of talked about, restructuring your content as a mini knowledge hub, which includes the coverage depth and overall intent resolution, expanding on what somebody could be looking for. The technical extractability, clean HTML. This is using snackable content. Use your hierarchy of your H1 through H4s. Make sure that it's understanding this. Use your structured content, your structured elements, your list formats, your number formats. All of those are critical. If you can bring in some WebMCP and MCP type of coding, you're going to be better off for a future state than you are currently. And the idea here is site usability. Strong usability technically is going to allow the LLMs to extract what it needs out of your content. Then the shift from a domain authority to entity trust. This is getting into more of the overall entity trust. What the brand mentions, it's going to get into brand recognition, your domain, authoritative values, your LLMs, your structured data, all of those informations that we look at as we look at that. And the last one is monitoring, of course. As we look at monitoring, attribution in LLMs is a little bit more difficult because there's not always a direct link that's going to cross you over. But there is a triangulation way. At iQuanti, we've been kind of obsessed with this lately. And over the last few months, we've been developing technology that will allow us to actually measure AI visibility more than just what's coming out of like a Profound or BrightEdge or SEMrush that gives you visibility, which is fantastic. But what we're looking for is attribution to an ROI model. So we're looking for how much did LLM visibility actually contribute to that new app start or that new loan app. So whatever that looks like, we're cracking that as we speak right now, and we've made some really good headway on that. Again, everything's built on the SEO foundation. Entity trust. This is kind of a new concept. When we first started down this path, iQuanti built its own models, and we did our own testing, and we did like 7.5 million different variables and different data pulls to really kind of look at data trends and look at everything that's kind of impacting it. Then more things came out of the woodworks, and more platforms came out, and there's wonderful reporting information that's there now. But one of the things that we discovered is it's not just domain authority itself. Again, as I said earlier, domain authority only gets you prioritization in the retrieval pool, meaning that you get a seat at that table for your content to be looked at. But if your content doesn't have the content depth that we just spoke about, it's not going to get cited. It will be overlooked. So when we look at what does entity trust really include, there's 4 main components: your domain authority, the brand recognition, which is an interesting one. Brand recognition is how your brand is seen. So it could be omni-channel integration. It could be how strong your brand search volumes are, your brand voice, how the internet sees your brand in comparison to its competitors. That brand recognition is going to help you in LLMs. Content consistency is the messaging of your content as you go across the web. That is one of those areas where you have to kind of be in a Me Too situation. You can't go against the grain. If everybody is defining what is an APR as X, but you define it as Y, the LLMs are going to overlook you. They're not going to gamble and take a risk of a hallucination. They're going to go with, if 90% of the people say this, they're going to go with a 90% versus a 10% mixture of people saying something different. They're always going to run upstream, or excuse me, downstream with the masses on the content consistency. So just make sure your messaging is the right answer as it relates to the rest of the market and the audience of what people are seeing and what's being ranked, especially what's in the answer elements already. You can kind of understand what that looks like. Again, you can differentiate yourself by having the content depth that you're looking at. And lastly is the brand mentions across the web. Brand mentions and brand sentiment, I kind of loop these together, even though sentiment's not necessarily a mention itself, but these are things that do not have to necessarily be linked, but they do need to mention your brand name. So if I'm looking to purchase something or look at a new travel credit card, and everywhere I go, it keeps mentioning this top 3 people, the top 3 banks that have the best travel credit cards, I'm going to probably see that repeat over and over and over, and most likely I'm going to elevate and gravitate to those 3. I'm not going to look at some anomaly off the chart that only one person's ever mentioned. It doesn't have enough trust factors to me as a user. And that's what these brand mentions are doing in the LLMs, is it's gone beyond just links. It's going to actual brand mentions as we look at that. So your authority programs, if you're running any at a brand level, need to encompass both non-branded link acquisition for SEO, but more importantly, the brand mentions, which doesn't necessarily have to have a link into your mentions across the web. Here's an example of brand citations. You know, related prompts. You can have different prompts, and these prompt clusters, every prompt cluster that you have is going to have a different influencing website that has brand mentions to you. So you could have prompt clusters like ETF portfolio, ETF for beginners, build an portfolio with ETFs, so on and so forth. The top ones here is Money, US News, Morningstar, NerdWallet's up there, Forbes is up there. These sites are the ones that are mentioning other brands about this prompt cluster. Now, if you go to a different prompt cluster like home mortgage or a refi or a HELOC or something of that nature, the prompt cluster or the influencing citations are going to be much different. They won't necessarily be the same order. So the idea here is to look at how can we understand this prompt data and which influencing websites are actually influencing this answer element. So we have all of that data. We go through all of that. We cluster the prompts, and then we match it to your pages on the intent. And now we have an understanding, and we can actually see the gaps. If the average company that is being matched in the answer element has 8 citations on average for this prompt cluster, but you only have 2, we have a little bit of a gap to fill. So we kind of look at that calculation of how do you equal or exceed the current influencing brands that are mentioned on the websites. Here's an example of how that actually looks. So again, you go into an LLM, you ask a question, it gives you an answer, and then it gives you a citation. You track that citation back. You can see this is on Investopedia, and in this particular case, Charles Schwab was mentioned on this, and there's mentions of Vanguard and BlackRock as well, and it becomes part of the answer itself. So that citation's tracking back. It was mentioned on a third-party website. There is no link to it. It's just a non-link brand mention, and it's not necessarily Charles Schwab's article. They're just mentioned as one of the biggest ETF companies available. So this is the type of digital PR that you're going to need to do in order to get these brand mentions. You have to know what sources. Obviously, if this Investopedia was influencing this prompt cluster, it wouldn't do us any good to be on NerdWallet, for example, if NerdWallet wasn't part of this prompt cluster. It's not going to influence. Investopedia was the one influencing it. So you got to have to match these citations to the prompt clusters. Another example, again, top U.S. market cap ETFs. Vanguard is mentioned again. It's mentioned on Bankrate. So here we just want to look at all of that. Those are just some examples as we kind of go through that. But that's really important to kind of understand the brand citations as how that looks on third-party websites. As I mentioned about content consistency, this is an important thing, that when LLMs are evaluating, they're looking, does this align with others? Is this matching what everybody's saying, or is it contradicting them? They absolutely want to minimize the hallucination. They want to avoid any conflict. They want to be right all the times. So they're going to prefer sources that are established, consistent, widely referenced, and ultimately it's a low risk for them to cite. And the reality is, if your content is not technically correct, you're going to most likely be ignored. If it's vague, you're going to be ignored. If it's not consistent with the other messaging, you're going to be ignored. So there's a lot of ways to kind of be overlooked and ignored. And you might reflect right now as you look at your content and say, wow, I can see why we're not really showing up much in the visibility of these answer elements, because our content is pretty thin when we start talking about this type of depth. And then technically you might have some problems as well that might be holding you back. Okay. At the end of the day, LLMs are looking at every source as a bet. The model is asking, if I use this source, how confident am I that I'm going to be right or I'm going to be wrong? So just kind of rely on that. You kind of put yourself in the shoes of the LLM. Why would they pick you? What do you have that others don't have? How can you drive more depth and more relevancy to that? And how do you get those mentions to make sure that you're validated on that as well? This is great, getting into a little bit more technical about some usability signals. Structure we talked about, but we really want to make sure your HTML is clean. It doesn't have a lot of bloat, unnecessary. You know, there's a lot of people use plugins in the CMS, especially if you're on a WordPress platform. Adobe, it's quite a bit less. But whatever CMS that you're using, make sure your content's clean and it's structured well, not only for the users but for the machines. We're really getting into an age where we have to optimize for users and content and readership, but we also have to optimize for the bots and more of the machine learning as well as we look at this. So it needs to be easy to chunk, better semantic value, and higher retrieval as we look at that. So don't use long, unbroken text. Don't just create 2,000, 3,000 words with no breakups at all. No H2s, no H3s. Make sure that the topics, you don't want to go completely off topic in one section. Again, stick to the edge cases, the implied questions, everything that we just went through on the content strategy, because it's going to struggle to isolate any particular meaning if you don't have this structure correct. The other one that is really interesting is low ambiguity. LLM avoids any content that requires interpretation. So if you're mentioning something that is really vague or it needs certain context and as a dependency, it's going to overlook you. They really prefer precise, direct answers, explicit statements, clear sponsorship. And what it's looking for, example, is a statement. If you wrote, this can impact your score depending on various factors. Okay, what factors? Assuming we're talking about credit score, but it doesn't actually say it's credit score. It just says score. Versus being very clear and direct with this, saying a high credit utilization, anything above 30%, can actually lower your credit score. One, that's direct. Number two, it's citable. And number three, it's extractable. So the LLMs can actually pull that quote out, pull that definition out, and reuse it over and over because it's short, it's sweet, it's to the point. And if you structure the content properly with the right HTML, it's going to be easy to extract as well. We've always talked about snackable content, chunkable. This doesn't change. We're still down that road. You need the content, because it needs to be extractable, you need to have it be chunkable or snackable. There's a lot of ables here, as we're talking about this. Interesting. But you do really want to make sure that your content is short paragraphs, very concise, self-contained meaning, direct answers. You don't want something that is buried deep into the definition with long narrative where you're requiring the bot to go in and interpret and pull out the right sentence. That's too much of a lift. There's too many other sites, too many other pages and content that doesn't require that much effort. They're going to overlook you and go take an easier route. So make sure that you are that easier route versus something that your competitors are doing. Last one, we talked about direct answering. I can't stress this enough. This is going to give you a 35 to 40% boost right off the bat with your content. Make sure that you're using things like your definitions, your clear answers, direct answers, your list, steps, 7 steps to do this, 5 important things to do. Here I have 4 core usability signals. It's things that can be easily extractable and then becomes very citable to the LLMs as well. So again, if you had something like API or something that can lenders use and can vary depending on, that's too vague. It's too weak. It's not answering it. Again, APR, the annual percentage interest rate, is the total yearly cost of borrowing, including interest and fees. One's extractable, the other sentence not. So let's just make sure that when you do the direct answers, you kind of keep this in mind, reduce that vague general talk track. And I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of people because we're used to kind of writing in that way, but you got to get a little bit more direct to the point on that. When we look at the LLM retrieval, the explicit answers to questions, your content should directly answer, as we were just talking about, why it matters. Answer-ready sentences, no exploratory content. If the answer isn't obvious, it's going to get skipped. So, weak example. There are several factors that influence credit scores. Okay, what factors? That's literally why I'm here. I want to know what affects a credit score. So don't tell me that there's a lot of factors that will infect it or influence it. I want to know what those factors are. Versus saying that the fastest way to improve your credit score is to reduce your credit utilization below 30%. It's a very distinct, direct answer to that. Okay. Lists we already talked about. We don't need to kind of go over that again. Again, very important. Example of this, improving your credit score involves multiple actions, including pay down to your debt. Or you can say, improving your credit score involves the following. A, reduce credit utilization. B, make your payments on time. Number 3, dispute your errors. Put in a list or some sort of structured format because it allows the LLM to come in, grab it, retrieve it, and be able to cite that in a partial answer. Where the other is just a vague sentence, and it's too much of a lift again. Structured data, I'm always been a fan of this. The LLMs, if you don't know how to do this, LLMs are doing a lot. Claude, ChatGPT can give you what structured markup you should include. They can analyze a page and give you examples of what structured data you should do. But as we evolve into more data, big data, which we're definitely embarking on, the bots have got to have a way to segment and look at your data quicker than reading every single line, every single word. So the structured data really kind of gives that. WebMCP and MCP is very similar. I referenced this just because this is more in the agentic AI coming down the pipes, but it's very similar to schema markup. So you might want to look at that as well. Entity clarity. Your content clearly defines what things are, how they relate, what entities are involved. It has to be very structured that way versus saying, like a weak example would be, this impacts your score. Again, very vague. Strong example, credit utilization, which is the percentage of available credit you're using impacts your credit score. So, you know, the sentence, this impacts your score, does not stand on its own 2 feet. If you read that in isolation, you'd have no idea what that means. So it has dependencies. And even at that point, you have to parse it out and try to connect the dots yourself. Where the second statement is self-standing, very direct, citable, and very extractable. Measurement. Obviously, when we look at measurement, measurement is changing. Our KPIs have shifted over time here, and what we're looking at now is AI KPIs are things like your visibility score. 8% moves to 12, 12 goes to 22. Whatever that is, your visibility is an overarching score. Your share of voice based on a particular topic. Citation share. How much of your citation are you improving on? Your overall visible rankings by topic. Citation rate, URL citations for third party or brand mentions, your brand sentiment. You can also check your accuracy of the prompts based on your actual factual data. So that could be another KPI that you look at this. And then ultimately, yes, we do want to get to AI-driven traffic. That's somewhat, as I mentioned, gray traffic, we're going to call that. The attribution is slightly less direct. It requires a little bit more programming. For us, we've created an attribution model that helps do this with using 9 different models, and it's similar to a multi-mix attribution model. But it allows us to kind of scale what does the gray traffic look like coming from AI or LLMs, and what's it doing based on your conversion as well. So all of that's very important to do. My recommendation, of course, is not to abandon the SEO. Have your SEO dashboard, your rankings, have the AI part of that. And I love to see paid in that as well, the paid channels and your social channels, your local GBP. If you have a lot of locations, bring all of that in there. Get a holistic dashboard that you can see everything at one time so you can see how things are affecting. You're going to see that as your visibility score increases, your brand search volume might increase, or your direct traffic will definitely increase. That's because you're getting answers and people are crossing over. They're not necessarily clicking on a link in ChatGPT or Claude. They could be just taking that information and going directly to your website with that information. So KPIs have changed and shifted a little bit to that. But with that, you know, I really kind of say, you know, the future of SEO belongs to those who become the source, not just the result. As SEOs, we're quite used to ranking and becoming that rank result. But in here, we need to be the answer itself and the source of that answer. So with that, I'm going to probably open up to questions. Again, I do have some past webinars. You can scan the QR code, look at that, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any of the questions that we have here.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Wayne. Yes, and everyone, if now is our Q&A session. We got about 10 or 15 minutes here. So if you've got something on your mind, now is definitely the moment to get that question into the queue. But we do have some good questions in here already. So let's just jump right in. So first question is, Wayne, I'm excited to hear you talk about WebMCP. What are you seeing in terms of uptake of that technology, how AI answer engine crawlers are using it, et cetera?
Yeah, it's really quite new. Implementation and integration is probably still on the forefront, the cutting edge, if you will. Where this is going to come into play is in the agentic AI, in the multi-agent kind of mode as it's doing this. So what that means is, for example, if I am a credit card holder or a bank and I have travel credit cards, I could be in ChatGPT or Claude and start asking questions about, I'm looking to book a vacation and I need to get out of here. I need to get someplace warm. What are the best places? And obviously this has nothing to do with credit cards or booking a credit card. But as it goes through, there might be an offer that you have that says for a new application, you get a 50,000 point offer, or you get a reward of this, whatever that offer is. The LLM could actually pull that offer, supply it to the user, and say, look, you can pay for your flight through this travel benefit if you apply for this credit card. Would you like to apply for that? And if the user says yes, the agent could look at the WebMCP code and know where the application button is. The WebMCP is like schema markup, that it's identifying certain CTAs that are important part of your content that the agents need to kind of reply back to. So it's really good for agentic mode as you're looking at that. So if you're looking for future development on your web and how can you kind of future-proof for the next stage of AI, that would be one that I would look to, is kind of readiness your website for agentic AI, where the agents are actually coming in doing the tasks and versus the users.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Wayne. All right. Another question. Say an article contains all the ables, but it's sponsored content. Will the LLM be less likely to cite that source?
Well, sponsored content is most likely going to sit on somebody else's website. So you want the ables on your website. You want that content depth, that content continuity and consistent messaging, and the overall implied questions and edge cases. All of that's your website. So again, match the ables to your content on your website. That's part of your content strategy. Now, the citations for sponsored content will help. I don't have data on how much weight sponsored content versus non-sponsored content has on a citation, but we do know that all citations are making up an influence. So it is helping at this point. So again, you can look at third-party websites as getting those mentions. And if you're doing sponsored content, that's fine. Get those mentions on theirs. But the 4 ables should be part of your content strategy on your own website.
Great, great, great. Thanks. And what about PDF formatted content? How does that get consumed by LLMs?
Yeah, good question. It's going to crawl through. It's going to go through there. It's more difficult to extract. It's going to give you some context. So a lot of things, a lot of recommendations. We like HTML versions that are structured and visually appealing, and then have a PDF download available as well. So you can use that as part of it. But it's going to go through your videos, your transcripts, your images, your infographics, your PDFs. It's able to kind of scan through all of that. But again, I would make sure that you still have HTML that can extract out of there.
A lot of great questions from the audience here. All right. Another question. Isn't it garbage in, garbage out? How do you know if the source training is good or reliable?
Yeah, great question. That's obviously I don't sit on the seat of ChatGPT or Anthropic here, but understanding how that knowledge base is, they have to program and try to defer that. We know that's kind of the same thing that's been I've been in SEO doing this for 30 years now, and all the way back from when Google started, those hallucinations or the garbage in, garbage out concept has always been there. How do you filter what's good and what's not? And I think what happens here is that's why the third-party validation comes into play. That's why Reddit is now one of the most cited sources for AI visibility, because it's a peer-to-peer network that people are talking in raw comments about what's happening on a particular topic. So, it allows the LLMs to really do that filtering process a little bit more with more depth or with more filter than what Google's doing. Google's typically using backlinks and authoritative signals to weight how that content looks like. The more links, the more authoritative, the more quality, trusted sources that are coming. That means you're trusted. It's putting that relationship together. But in the LLM, the way it's kind of dissecting the garbage in is it's looking at, yes, we want to look at that authoritative value, but it's looking at your sentiment, it's looking at the mentions, it's looking at the content consistency across all of the messaging. So it's taking kind of a several roundabout filters and putting all of those elements in together in record time to give you a spit out, where as these models continue and these AI or these LLMs continue to release different versions of their models, as you see from OpenAI and Anthropic, they continue to release new models and updates. All of that modeling is bettering the system. It's reducing that garbage out, even if there's garbage in component of it. So it's allowing that filtering system is a lot more complex than what Google does.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thanks. All right. Another good question here. Does the way users interact with LLM results directly influence how or what info LLMs present going forward? In other words, is it a vicious cycle if you aren't showing up in results, or do LLMs start fresh each time?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's if you're not cited, if you're not ranked, if you don't have the depth and the content, you're never going to be cited. You're just going to be overlooked always. Doesn't matter how many new chat sessions somebody creates. You're just not part of that retrieval pool. So again, think about it at the depth. Let's draw a line in the sand. Very simple. Let's say that you have to be in the top 20 ranked results on any topic to even be considered. So if you're 21, 30, 50, 100 in the rank results, it doesn't matter how many times you start a new session and ask that prompt over and over, you're going to never show up. I'm simplifying that, but in a way that there's a lot of accuracy to that analogy. So as you look at how it's doing it, you're going to see similarities to, and I definitely encourage people to do this. Ask the prompt, especially in ChatGPT. Claude's a little bit different, but ChatGPT, if you ask a prompt and then go to the web and ask the same query, you're going to see a lot of the same results show up, and it's pulling from those ranked results that are coming in there. So that's why it's important to kind of be part of that. I'm not sure if that answers the question or if there's a follow-up. If there's a follow-up, please put in the chat on that.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Next question here. What is the difference between entity authority and domain authority?
Yeah, great. So again, domain authority, we're used to looking at DR, DA. We're looking at the overall arching, how much authoritative value the domain has as it relates to the link equity. Domain authority or page authority, and that same link equity is at a page level for page authority. However, entity authority is a combination of 4 different things: your overall domain authority, your content consistency, your brand recognition, which is like how strong is your brand strength, which is really nothing that an SEO can kind of control. That's larger, that's at a brand level. But this is where we start working with our brand teams to really kind of influence those. And then the brand mentions is the 4th one. So entity trust is a combination of 4 different things to look at how much your entity itself has got those trust factors, versus your domain authority is just how authoritative in the relationship or context of link equity.
And does content change for AI and LLMs versus Google?
Yeah, it does. As we kind of went into that one slide where we had the 4 different matches, core intent matches the primary Google needs. So when you're looking at matching a search query to that intent of that query, Google's looking for that core intent. You also have to provide that in the LLMs, but the LLMs also need the edge cases, the implied questions, and the fan out queries. So you're looking at it much deeper in the LLMs than what you typically see for Google.
Excellent. Great. I think we've got time for one more question here. Let's see. How about, how do you know what prompts are being said?
Sure. We use tools. There's a lot of tools on the market. We're a partner with Profound, and Profound's a leading platform that allows that prompt data. So we get that prompt information, that prompt data from Profound, and you can put any topic and any brand, any website, and it's going to show you the prompt data, what prompts are being said. I think BrightEdge has got something similar as well. We're kind of tool agnostic at our agency, but at the same token, Profound's been a good leader in that industry, and we found really good success with their data. So we continue to stick with that. But it's critical. It's an absolute must. You need to know what the prompts are. The prompts are the same equivalent to your keywords. So you need to know what the prompts are. You need to group those into a prompt cluster, so you have some semantic value into those clusters. So then you can inform and write your content with all of the 4 different pillars in mind that we talked about. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Wayne. I think that is about enough. We've got just a little bit at the top of the hour. We always like to give folks a little bit of time to shift to the next thing that they're doing at the top of the hour. So, first of all, Wayne, thank you so much for your expertise. Really appreciate you being here today. Really good session. It's always impressive when one person can carry the ball the whole way by themselves.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate being here.
And of course, everyone in the audience, really appreciate your time, of course, and asking all those great questions at the end there and participating in that poll. We'll be sending you a follow-up email with recording of the event and some other material kind of coming your way the next day or two. So please keep an eye out for that. And with that, I will wrap it up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.